So today is Patrick House's 40th birthday, and he woke up on my boat here in the desert. It's Monday morning. We've been celebrating all weekend with all of his favorite people in the world, about 27 of us. And for those of you who don't know, Patrick is my absent co-host of the Being in the World podcast. And he is a...
Adjective?
Absent, yes.
You're absent.
My absent co-host for the last several episodes, but I'm always trying to lure you back. And it took...
That's 70% heat of absent. That's better.
But it's been, yes, you have to stop because I'm forcing you to podcast with me in my new way. What are you watching?
For All Mankind.
And it's good.
Well, so
You recommend it?
I mean, so it's made by, or something by Ron Moore, who made Battlestar Galactica, which is obviously, clearly, objectively one of the best shows of all time. It is about like this counterfactual where Russia made it to the moon first, and it's super interesting because they had women, they had astronauts who were women in Russia at the time, right? Like cosmonauts, and so immediately America had to like accelerate many issues, any like social and political issues, such that they had to start training female astronauts immediately in the 60s in order to keep up, which led to this whole like knockdown series of consequences where like there was a female president in the 80s because women were seen as capable much earlier. It's really fascinating. And there's this guy who's like the cowboy astronaut. And it's interesting because the major theme of this episode is about him being too old to do his job anymore, but he stubbornly insists on piloting a craft even though he's developing like an age-related tremor. And not that that's like thematically related to turning 40, but it's actually pretty apropos.
I want to know about this like funky 2K speaker behind you because it's been playing Anna Karenina for the last 35 hours until 3:21 a.m. this morning for basically kind of whispered around the compound. The desert has this amazing quality where the sound travels just right.
Yeah.
So what's the story there?
Well, you gotta see that it's a speaker. I'm not wearing pants.
Okay, I'll spare the audience. We'll pan to the desert. You can see where we are on a sailboat. This is great.
Yeah.
This bringing the sailboat here was its own story with a crane.
My friend Owen, a very good friend Owen, he's this weird kind of like hobbyist who is an expert carpenter who also happens to make speakers. And so he took this old suitcase and turned it into a little speaker system. And he just brings it around.
I didn't know it was custom made. And was this your birthday present?
No. This is too good to be a birthday present. This is just...
It's on loan.
Yeah. I was carrying it in my trunk to get it back to San Francisco unscathed.
It's so cool.
It's fucking amazing.
And it's a Bluetooth?
Yeah, it's Bluetooth. You can do anything with it.
And you just made it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was...
The way that everything we see is just made. I mean, I don't know how.
Very San Francisco sticker.
Yes, it's quite San Francisco. And yeah, I've had this thing where like I never fully, I never finished Anna Karenina, the book. So like I've read everything. So as soon as, spoilers, as soon as she jumps onto the train, I just put the book down because it's called Anna Karenina. So when she dies, like, what's the point? Like, why would you keep going? And so there's a few pages at the end. It's kind of like some postscript where Karenina left a kitty, or, you know, kind of like the end of a movie where you get the little update, like 20 years later, and he's still stuck. And I had always just had this, I guess, just like, I assumed the like lessons and messages and stories of Anna Karenina would be more relevant to my life when I was 40. So when I was like in my teens, I was told by this literature professor, who basically is the reason why I think carefully about the things I say and write, is because of one man named John Bishop, who was a Berkeley professor. He was the James Joyce like expert. He gave on Bloomsday. He gave the speech. He would go to Ireland. He would be in the honorary invitee to give the keynote speech on Bloomsday in Ireland. That's how much he was respected as a Joyce scholar. He wrote this Book of the Dead thing on Finnegan's Wake, which is in and of itself a like life's work. Anyway, he like taught me how to close read. He taught me how to like close observe life. And he said Anna Karenina is the best book of the 20th century, or rather the 19th century. And when he said that, I thought to myself, like, I could kind of indulge in all of the best art now when I'm like a young, idiotic teenager, or I could like give myself something to like look forward to in life, like wait, and not read it till I'm 40. And through a complicated series of events, I did end up reading it early, but only because I was invited to be in a book club about it with someone who was dealing with a lot of the emotional themes of the book. But I still haven't finished it. And so I couldn't this weekend. Like,
You mean you'd read all of it but the last 2 pages?
I'd read all of it but the last 2 pages, or last few. I don't know how actually
Okay.
they were. And so I figured a way to accomplish my goal while still maintaining a life well lived was to just simply have it playing as an audiobook in the background for the entirety of this weekend.
Who was reading it?
Maggie Gyllenhaal, obviously.
And you have a particular love of like listening to women read, don't you? Or no, you prefer to read to read or to be read to? We've talked about this before, but I can't remember.
Well,
I like reading to people, and you like being read to, I think.
I like both quite a bit. It's like one of those things where sometimes, yeah. I guess if I looked through the history of my bank statements, there's some. I've paid for one of those two. I won't say which. But yeah, so early this morning.
I can't decide if I should let that drop or can I try and dig a little deeper. What do you mean you've paid for it? Is that something you're willing to confess to on camera? Think hard. What's that?
Correct. No, it is not.
Okay.
And
We'll leave it to the viewer's imagination.
Yeah, like all of fiction. You know, it happens in your head. You can interpret it the way anyone wishes. But yeah, so I figured out the exact length of the audiobook, which was 33 hours and 30 minutes. And I set it to start 33 hours and 30 minutes before my birthday.
And when you say your birthday, you don't mean midnight. You mean the actual time you were born, right?
You're asking such good questions. It's as if you've heard this story before.
That's okay. That's not cheating.
The artifice of art.
Is that people do pre interviews all the time, and they know what they're going to talk about. I've never been accused of too much preparation before, especially for the podcast.
Nor have I. I mean, I guess is there an etymological overlap there? Is it a coincidence that art starts artifice?
Oh, I don't know. I should know that.
Someone figured that out. Yeah, I was born at 6:21 a.m. in Long Island, New York, 40 years ago. But I'm a fan of precision. So like I was born at 6:21 in a very particular time zone, and like, like sea turtles know how to get back to where they were born, and they're kind of get like circadian and physiologically locked to the exact spot on Earth and the time that they were born, so that they can find their way back there when they, need to do the thing they do to keep turtles going. And yeah, so it ended at 3:21 a.m. this morning as I was peacefully asleep.
In the boat, right?
In the boat. Oh yeah.
Take this a little bit here. So good. What made you decide to celebrate here of all places? It's kind of a peculiar choice, especially in the middle of winter. It's freezing. The wind just died down miraculously and ironically. It's like warm and lovely how I was hoping it would be this whole week. Instead, it was just blisteringly cold.
The artifice again. I would say that it's for the same reason. In science, there's like clumpers and splitters. There's two kinds of scientists, right? Those that see observations and then collapse them into one thing, and then those that see a bunch of things and actually would rather believe that they are each is an independent event. And I'm much more of the clumper. So I would say the reason I did it here was the same reason I moved here during the apocalypse. Which, right? So like when the three horsemen of the apocalypse, like California was burning, the pandemic was new and fresh and pre-vaccine and everything, and we were like dangerously sliding down the hill towards autocracy. Maybe you can pinpoint the time based on that comment. So to me, that was three of the four horsemen. And I was like, well, I might as well go to like the Mask of the Red Death equivalent, the Edgar Allan Poe story, right? Where everyone just get like during the Middle Age pandemics, everyone just sequestered themselves in a party and lived.
The Decameron is another good reference for that. If you haven't read the Decameron, great stories.
Yeah, and I mean this is Decameron-esque, right? And there's something a bit apocalyptic about turning 40. So maybe the fourth horseman has arrived. But yeah, I mean, and also it's close to you, and I love this place so much, and I love the cold. The easiest way to think about the way like my sleeping habits and patterns is that I'm like menopausal, basically. You know, like I'm standing by the fridge with the open door at all times.
He says wearing a ridiculously warm-looking fur coat.
Look,
he's full of contradictions.
Ecstatic truth.
And do you want to just like say a little bit about this? Are you getting too warm? Oh, some water. What was the celebration like? I found it a fascinating collection of humans and
yeah. There's this interesting. I think like a good half of my anecdotes start. Well, I was watching this Cuttlefish documentary once. So, pause. I was watching this Cuttlefish documentary once, and they have this like chameleonic shape shifting thing. They can literally become. They can totally change their morphology of their body to be like either the large male version, or they totally shapeshift into some of them. They're called sneaker males, into the female version. But they also have like I think the most advanced camouflage and like dynamic coloration. It's like fucking stunning watching these documentaries. But anyway, there's one scene in one of them where like you have a cuttlefish in the middle of the camera, and on one side is an aggressive male that it's trying to flash. It changes the patterns on its body. It uses its camouflage as social signaling, right? And it changes the patterns of its body to give off warnings, like a warning, like defensive signal. And on the other side is like a female cuttlefish that it's flirting with. And so one half of it is aggressive, defensive, and then the other half is flirtatious. It literally splits its body in half and presents two different signals. And like, I think what's really interesting about, I assume everybody does this, but like friend groups, they're like slightly different. I have a lot of disparate interests, and I have like different friend groups, and they haven't all met, right? And it's kind of fascinating to feel almost like pulled in many directions, where I like got to witness the overlap of different friend groups who have, I think, maybe like slightly different versions of who I am, and to watch them all mash. And I felt this interesting kind of almost need to be the cuttlefish of all shapes and sizes of all history, like friends from college, very different from friends I met right? Like within the last year or with very recently in totally different parts of my life and everything. And so I felt almost like I had to be all ages at once. And I mean, the ultimate question is like, where's the actual cuttlefish in there? You know, if it's all just display, like where's the thing in and of itself? So it was just really interesting watching like people compare the anecdotes that I've told and be like, oh wait, he told me that, and it's like, oh wait, he told me that. I thought that was just mine. Wait,
And do you see? I see turning 40 as. So I'm 8 years behind you or ahead of you. I don't know, one or the other. I'm 48. In an ideal world, no, it's okay.
Can I hold it?
No.
Come on, give me this. Just that.
Okay, carefully.
Okay,
I'm gonna be maybe I'm little.
it's perfect. You lit beautifully.
It is a really nice morning here, and it is. I'm enjoying this blending of the last couple of episodes of the podcast. I've done like this filming, and it's been a really great feeling of bringing my documentary filmmaker, skills insofar as they exist, or just intuitions, let's say, to the medium of the podcast, and it feels really good to just like have that language to be playing with instead of just having like a fixed camera and two people talking to each other on a mic. So I'm excited about this new chapter. I've always said it would take me 100 episodes to find my voice in this. Some people like Eric Kaplan has this great podcast called Terrifying Questions. Plug for it. You should listen to it if you haven't. But I was so amazed that they had found their like format in episode 1, and they just like were, there was like the breaks, the exact amount of time, and the way they introduce a guest if there is one, and some people have that, and it's amazing.
Well, Eric Kaplan has been accused of having a plan before.
Yeah. and so my way of doing things is different and it's slower. But my uncle Lilio, who died recently at age 95, my dad's younger brother, said that Ruspoli's age, like we mature by age 80. And that's why it always felt kind of natural that my dad had kids in his 70s. And we just have done things at a different pace. And also, the family has been around for almost 1,000 years. So it just happens on a slower time scale that Americans especially are used to.
So I told a story yesterday about the little immortal jellyfish, right? Turptosis nutricula, the guy who they.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to break my rule of having the one shot because Patrick hit stop after I talked a whole bunch. And if you make one cut, you've got to make 20, and it's going to be like.
And
so
you lose the trust of the viewer.
Yeah. So
anything is possible, including an accidental press of a button.
So Patrick had been interviewing me, which I thought was kind of cool, but now he hit stop, and I talked for like 10 minutes without. And that's just lost to time.
Does it just go away? Where does
it's
it
just
go?
Gone.
Oh.
There's no bringing it back. Let that be a metaphor. The bygone time is bygone.
I guess there are gaps in, like what is aging except kind of coming to terms with gaps in one's recording of life.
Yeah. Yeah, and memory, right? We have memories of like, they seem almost arbitrary, the things we remember and build us, or they come back and continue to like inform the narrative of who we are. So is there anything that we should try and recapture from those few minutes?
Now it's recall.
Yeah, forget it. Maybe we just end the podcast right there. I have gotten back into editing for the first time in many years because I'm finally making another movie and I'm super excited. This is partly what's inspired it, I think, picking up the camera again and documenting. Also, I have to give a nod to how cool I'm being a technophile. Like, this is amazing, the way this looks now. It's like, feels so cinematic.
Right.
When the phone used to be terrible, and it sounds cool, and like, we just have this gorgeous morning. Look at that. Anyway, reflections on turning 40, both, in terms of a reckoning of your existence. Do you feel like, oh fuck, like so much time has passed, and I haven't done enough, or you feeling on the right path?
Well, I mean, so this is the interesting thing to me is like 40 to me feels very, very young, in a sense. But there's like only in the sense of like I do feel like we're a kind of 3 billion year continuous line, like of some single cell which refused to die, right? So there is continuity that goes back that far. But I don't have the same kind of this, like there's something to the American newness of this place. Can't even. I
We've
don't
been
like the
so
editing.
shaken by that.
It ruined everything.
No, it didn't. No, we have to just live with the mistakes. Again, let that be a metaphor.
Because now I'm having this like, wait, did I tell this already? Is it captured?
Right,
in the
right.
thing?
No. I know. Well, everything I was filming you was captured. It's just like when you were filming me, it stopped it halfway through.
Stop. Yeah, so I think I was about to ask you about the little jellyfish, right? Because it was the story I told yesterday.
Yeah.
About this little jellyfish that is biologically immortal, but it resets itself. And the way that it resets itself is really interesting to me because it kind of reverts back to its childish single cell nature. And then the same organism continues to then go through these cycles of adult and then kind of revert back to a single cell and then become an adult and revert back. But it maintains this continuity. And I've always felt very detached from continuity, kind of family continuity and cultural continuity. This, the American kind of version of things is very young, right? It's an immature kind of infancy of a country. Whereas I know your heritage and lineage and everything goes back hundreds of years, thousands of years. You have documents of these things and old objects and swords and teacups and all these things. So 40 to you feels proportionally, perhaps, much different than 40 feels to me, which is like, it's yours is a ratio of you to your cultural legacy, and mine feels like I just kind of like by fiat emerged from the foam of the sea around 40 years ago. I have no objects from before when I was born, right? Like I have no reminders, and my memory is very kind of controlled by seeing an object, seeing a space, and then having all of those memories kind of conjure. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine like we talk about this thing like age, like a number, and we talk about, oh, I once turned 40. Say like you might have a story of your 40th birthday, but the idea that it being the same thing to both of us, I feel like is slightly erroneous, right? Because to me it has this relative proportion of what came before and what perhaps will happen, and to you, your version of before is probably larger, and maybe even what will happen. You might feel more of a burden to kind of proceed and keep something going. So like, we don't even have like tree rings. We don't even have biological tree rings as humans. Like you can't cut us in half and have, you can, and you could ask someone to say, how old is this thing? How old is this biological human? But we have no way of actually knowing. You can do these like weird inferences with, I think, like dental records, and you might be able to look for some markers of cell division and infer, but like you cannot tell a 17-year-old from an 18-year-old from a 20.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's no tree ring. You cannot biologically precisely age someone, like determine their age.
Right.
There's no way to. We're like billions, trillions, I don't even know, of cells, all different ages. Like some of them were born yesterday. When your skin repairs itself, it's like, that's new. That's a new cell from scratch.
I do want to touch on, because I'm making a film about this and because you have thoughts on it, as does the whole world right now. I've been fascinated, along with a lot of other people, with the advent of what they're calling AI. I'll put it in scare quotes. Spoiler alert. But, I was fascinated listening to one of your friends who's a professor of neuroscience saying, we have no idea how the brain works, let alone how to make an artificial one. And what we're doing here with these LLMs is he said it's a really good demo. But it does seem to be like now in 2023, one of the main like technological breakthroughs, if you will. At least that's the way it's presented in the media. Like, wow, we've crossed over into this, my whole life, from a very critical point of view with Bert Dreyfus, saying AI can't do these basic things like understand common sense and or just natural language processing seemed like an impossibility. Somehow they seem to have come up with a trick to do these things that seemed impossible just a couple of years ago. Is this a significant thing we're going through? Is it all just hype? Can you give a couple of thoughts on this?
I mean, so what people have been experiencing is they finally started interacting with a machine that spat back something that felt that something that was that previously only came from a human, which is conversation, right? Which is speech, and it's competent speech, and it crossed some threshold. This ChatGPT stuff and all these large language models crossed some threshold where finally it became competently similar in its ability to use language to how humans use language. And so, like, one possibility is that every single time we've had a technological advance, every single time it has been mysteriously found that both life and these artificial versions of things use similar mechanisms, that that in time, decades later, it is then realized, when you have the little newspaper clipping from the 1880s or the 1920s where they're like, oh my God, light bulbs use electricity. People use electricity. My God, Frankenstein, we just need to electrify some meat and then it's going to be human. Because that is actually quite remarkable that humans use electricity to think, and all of like mammalian life and a lot of life has figured out how to use this like extremely efficient way of transferring energy. So one possibility is that, after all of this many, many centuries of hyperbole and technological innovation, where all the best scientists whose careers coincidentally happen to revolve around this thing, those were all wrong in the past. Everybody was wrong before when there was a supercomputer called a thinking machine, and it just wasn't quite a thinking machine. When Deep Blue came out and it could suddenly solve chess, and HAL from 2001, one of its miraculous, mysterious science fiction abilities was to beat a human at chess way, way before we could. One possibility is that suddenly, finally, in 2022, it happened. The machines became sentient. And the other possibility is that humans, since seemingly the beginning of time, have found and infused metamagical or metaphysical abilities into inanimate objects, right? We have found spirits in the forests. We see two people can look at the sky and one person sees the like beginnings of the stairway to God, and another person sees like the accumulation of moisture under an atmosphere. And so I think that's the perfect thing. It's kind of like if you're inclined to believe that there must be more to this universe, if you're inclined to believe that there is a mysterious force out there which animates us and might one day animate our machines in a way that is no different, then you might, when given a commercial product made by a multi-billion-dollar company who went through all kinds of iterations of tinkering to make sure that it
felt believable, including the use of first-person pronouns like I, um, even though it's just kind of running a trillions of calculations on GPUs made to process like light rendering of pixels, just like a video game, that it's actually no different than just a simulation of what it would be like to be intelligent. In the same way that you can find a little non-playable character in Minecraft, and you can walk up to it and it can converse with you. Um, is that alive? Is the little virtual video game characters that people interact with, who talk to the character and say things like, "I need this. I need you to go on this fetch quest for me."
But
Why is that not alive?
there's also a you could flip it. You could say that the people who say that humans only have this thing are the ones who are saying there's something magical that's animating us. And there's also a deflationary view in which people say, like, actually we've discovered that human beings are just, next token predictors, and we're much simpler than we once thought. And actually we figured it out because it's not that complicated. And then on the other side, you have your friend who's saying, we're so fucking complicated that we're not even at the beginning, like we're in the dark. He's like, and I'm at the state of the art, and I can tell you with confidence that we know nothing, nothing at all about what it is to to have a thought and consider a concept in your head, that we're so far away from this, and that the phone I'm holding has 4 billion transistors, and that's incredible, but they're all on-off switches, and that's not at all what neurons are.
So there's been this funny trend that I've noticed in the last 40 years, which is the kind of like de-expertising of society. Wikipedia shows up and suddenly everyone's equally capable of editing an expert level treatise on a thing. And I found this funny little trend recently, which is most of the opinions about whether or not these machines are conscious are coming from computer engineers and people who work on the thing. But to me, it's an interesting question. Like, let's say a volcano explodes somewhere across the world. Would you ask computer engineers their opinion on the volcano exploding? Would you why is it the case that we sort of have forgotten that not everyone can, certainly everyone can have an opinion on everything, but I would not guess outside of my domain and guess outside of my domain expertise. And so
you're saying consciousness is that the domain of the neuroscientists or the domain of the philosophers, and just not the domain of the computer scientists? Whose domain is it?
Well, so computer science is a poorly made label. It's computer engineering. Like, there's not a lot of experimental design that goes into computer science as a science, right? It's not. I don't think it should be categorized as a science. And there's a very formal reason that scientific inquiry has certain kinds of testable conditions and statistical understandings of things and power and laws and all these things where, what has slowly happened is that a machine. Okay, I had GPT on my phone a long time ago, right? OpenAI had kind of hired me as a consultant to write science fiction alongside of them, and they gave me GPT on my phone. And I was going around like San Francisco and various places, like showing people, like, look, I have AGI on my phone. I have, and nobody gave a shit, right? And there's a reason. At the time, it didn't use first-person pronouns. It didn't say I. It didn't talk to you. It didn't talk back to you. It didn't seem to listen and have like a working memory of what you said recently.
It just continued what you wrote.
It just continued what you wrote. And I went to this AI salon meeting, and one of the questions posed to the group was, what is the most completely convincing interaction that you have ever had with an AI? And my answer, slightly puckishly, that's what I do, is I said, well, I think around somewhere in 2015, the popcorn button on the microwave started working, right? So like it used to always burn it. In 2008, if you pushed the popcorn button on the microwave, it was done for. It was a random chance whether or not you were going to get these like hard, cold kernels or just a burned bag of nothing at the end, right? And so, but somewhere these microwaves started to be able to kind of understand their environment, understand that bags of microwave popcorn come in different sizes, that the power wattage of the microwave matters, all these things. And it started actually, you can just do it now. They work. And I see language models as really no different than these kinds of things, which are like these pre-programmed abilities to respond in a dynamic way to your environment, to their whatever their environment is. And the question of, are they sentient? Are they intelligent? Are they conscious? Are they life? Are they living? That is an uninteresting, to me, question because it's zero. I find it zero for all. 0%. And the way that
What's going on back there? We have another documentarian. That's. Would you like to join our podcast?
Yeah.
By the way, I to unruffle you, rattle you.
Yeah.
This is a second part 2 episode, so I don't have to edit. I'm gonna just say that's how that episode ended, and then there'll be a part 2.
oh yeah,
So
What
that
did I miss?
part 3,
what's that?
maybe part
Did I
3.
miss the Anna Karenina bit?
Yeah.
Yep.
Just the way in.
Yo, that way. You've come the wrong way, or you could climb over.
I can climb.
Lucy was on an episode of the podcast,
2 episodes of that.
2 of that, and now 3.
The first part 2.
Yeah, because I've been shooting the podcast in more documentary style now, just like turning on the camera, and
don't know
Lucy's
about
the one of the last remnants from the birthday party. Are you gonna be able to do it?
I don't know. I may. It may not be good for this whole structure. So I see.
Do you have any reflections on Patrick turning 40?
Pure appreciation and support for this beautiful 40-year-old. But I miss
This
that
young man.
This young man. But I'm just keen to hear the birthday boy opine.
Yeah, but you're a little late to the party. We've already been filming for like 45
You were
minutes.
at 3:21 a.m. Was it 3:21 a.m.?
It was.
Were you
I was
here?
here. I was right here.
Were you asleep? Or you
I
were?
was very sleepy. Yeah.
Did you yet listen to the last 2 pages of Anna Karenina, read by Maggie Gyllenhaal?
Well, I
Have you though? Do you know? Did you?
no, but I allow myself to. I mean, I heard it.
Yeah, that's right.
I happened to be asleep, but I heard it. So I count it. I see no philosophical
But
difference.
would you like to listen?
Really?
To
I always wonder that because I always like sleep to things, whether it's audiobooks or podcasts, and I wonder if I absorb any of the stuff that I listen
It's
to
a
when I'm
question.
asleep.
It's a question. I think there are scientists that say these kinds of things.
There are scientists that study this because I mean, then you would imagine that you might be able to implant knowledge during sleep, and
Yeah.
people are like, "Oh my God, these 8 hours a day I spend asleep and unconscious. How inefficient! Why can't I keep learning?"
Yeah, there are studies on that. Could you study when you're asleep? Does that help?
But I mean, so there are a lot of things I don't remember about life, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that are gaps in my memory, and those still happened. Those still existed. Just because I don't remember them does not mean, they did not occur.
Right.
And so I don't mind the idea of
Lucy, stop making noise.
completing the book without having heard, without being conscious of it. I don't really care about that. So I mean, like, whether or
Would
not
you
I can
like to
recall
listen
it.
to it consciously now? It's like the question.
No,
Because
I did
would like
listen
to
to it.
witness you listening to the last 2 pages of.
You think it counts as listening even if you're unconscious?
Yeah, absolutely.
It might do. I'm not discounting.
Even what if you're under total anesthesia?
You probably listen to it, but you don't remember it afterwards.
No, but that's the same with when you're
You don't
sleeping.
know what happens in anesthesia.
So-
was one of his points.
Anesthesia is very different than sleep. Anesthesia, people will go into anesthesia crying and wake up crying and just pause. Right? So like it's
Or cry for a really long time.
the way that it was explained to me was like it's like by an anesthesiologist is kind of like lifting the needle off the record, and the record keeps spinning and then you put it back down.
Right.
That's anesthesia. And sleep is very different. Sleep, you are listening. People wake up if there's a fire alarm or a loud sound or you hear your name or there's this very egocentric kind of filter you still put while you're asleep. Your ears. It's fucking mind-boggling to me that evolution did not allow us to close our ears people have a lot of theories about how the brain works. People have a lot of explanations, and they take like fascinating human behavior, and then they take what we think we know about the brain and neuroscience, and then use one to connect to the other. And so we often end up with these like kind of simple left-right metaphors or triune brain.
I'm not a left-right person, by the way, by any stretch.
This is not a
I find it
personal attack.
ridiculous.
This
Okay.
is about the larger
General
concept
point. Yeah, I
of
agree.
many people, because each of us has one, opining about what a brain is and how it works. And every single one of the AI scientists and computer engineers who make these little ChatGPT things, they also have brains, and they are also mystified by how it works because we don't have an explanation. And in my kind of anecdotal observation, it seems that like people's opinions about the mystery of these new AIs, the ones that can kind of talk eloquently and competently, relates to how they think the brain works. So if they think the brain is just a very, very simple thing, if they've read one introductory textbook because their computer engineering professor said that, oh, we made neural nets in the 50s and they're modeled after how neurons work and remember, and look, we use binary signals like ones and zeros also in our brain. They read that one textbook and then collect these explanations over time of this mechanistic way that the brain must work, and then they tinker with these little silicon chips and program it, and it's called a neural network, and it's called artificial intelligence, and we say that they hallucinate now, and we use all these completely loaded phrases and concepts from how the brain works. And this is all just marketing. This is not science. This is not the ground truth of what is actually happening down there. So when it's, to say something is artificially intelligent, you need to know what you mean by naturally intelligent, and you often don't. To say, for example, when Sony released their PlayStation 2 in the early 2000s, it was powered by, guess what?
Electricity?
It was powered by electricity, exactly. And it was powered by electricity, which they then decided to call the emotion engine, right? In the early 70s, I believe 70s or 80s, there was a supercomputer competitor to the Cray supercomputer, and it was just called the thinking machine, right? So one possibility is that all of these computers are actually being accurately labeled with their natural and human cognitive skills, like they are intelligent and they can think. And the other possibility is that it sounds a lot fucking cooler to say artificial intelligence than it does to say super database, right? We would not be having these conversations if in the 50s the field of super databases had started existing. And it was very, very obvious to me that these are powered by GPUs on the cloud, which could otherwise power pixels in a video game. And it's just a bunch of computations that lead to a lovely package of a very convincing behavior that I think is nothing but simulating what an intelligence would be like.
There's a sense in which something that used to be impossible is now possible. So there used to be a talk about what it meant to understand being human. And that involved, according to John Searle, a set of background knowledge that could never be made explicit because it's just too much. There's like an infinite amount of facts about this boat that we could never exhaustively list. But now, so they would have test questions that they would ask, like an early attempt at artificial intelligence that was a clear failure. So they would say, a guy walks into a restaurant, orders a hamburger, but the hamburger's burned, so he leaves. And then you ask, did the person eat the hamburger or not? And that's nowhere in the story. That's in our understanding of the world, because we know that, burnt hamburgers don't taste good, even though that wasn't contained in the story, and that it has to be cooked properly in order for you to eat it. So maybe we know that the person tasted the hamburger, but then didn't like it and only ate like a bite, right? Sure. So if you ask, this was used as evidence by Dreyfus and Searle that the computers didn't have the requisite understanding of the world to exhibit intelligence. And now I've tested that same exact story on ChatGPT. I say, did the person eat the hamburger? And it says, well, no, the hamburger was burnt, so he probably didn't like it, and then he left. And I was like, okay, well, that is evidence of some sort of understanding. And it makes me wonder, like, I know that this computer is not living out in the world, but it has a lot of language. So it makes me wonder, is understanding made of language? Or, is what we call intelligence, is it enough to have a lot of words? Or do we need experience in the actual world? And what does that mean?
So you love chess.
Yes.
Do you believe that Deep Blue has an understanding of a queen and a pawn?
Not in the sense that I do, but in the sense that to win the game, but it doesn't understand what winning is, and it doesn't understand that queens exist, like also like all the extra stuff that's piled on to what a queen is that might inform our understanding of chess seems very different from a system whose only goal is to find the next move, let's say, right?
What is the difference between finding the next move and finding the next piece of a word?
Yeah, good. So it has this kind of very limited understanding whose only goal it is to find the next word. You're saying that that's enough.
No, I'm.
It's enough for a trick, but not enough for actual understanding.
Yeah. Does the microwave have an understanding of the popcorn that when you push the microwave or the popcorn button, it finally understands what popcorn is, what corn is, what heat is, what steam is, how to create what human preference is, how that we don't like burned things and our teeth are too fragile to eat kind of the kernels raw.
What is understanding?
That's
What is
the big
understanding we
question.
don't?
What is?
Well, so the interesting thing is that language captures. We use language to try desperately to capture the inside of our minds, and so when a machine uses language, it feels like it's also capturing something inside of its mind, and so we infer and give it a mind. But you have a backup camera on your truck, right? And it'll beep at you if you get close to something, right? Does it understand the world? Does it have a mental model of the world? The camera, the truck?
No.
It's interacting with the world. It can see with its little camera. It responds dynamically. Any object that you put close to it, it'll send an alert. It'll tell you what to do. It seems to have goals. It seems to be responding to the environment. Why are these language models not just obviously iterated and advanced versions of these other things? Just because it's using language is not different than any other kind of behavior. So like to me, the major surprise out of all this, right? So like, I'm pretty deflationary on this, in part because just like no one's asked me about it. It's like, why are they asking everyone out?
I'm asking you.
Yeah,
Here we go.
here we are.
Okay, it's okay. We rise to the challenges. When we last left off in last week's episode, we were talking about what understanding is. So you were saying the backup camera doesn't understand, but if we have to limit. Obviously, humans have a limit. We don't know where it is exactly because we're living that experience. But you could imagine an entity that says humans don't understand anything, like an entity much more intelligent or has more senses. There's a lot of shit going on around us that we have no sense of.
Right.
So you could make a case that humans don't understand anything, right? But then now with the ChatGPT, you can show it a picture, this is the latest development, right? Soon that'll be video. Google just got caught cheating on this, like showing video, but actually it was pictures. But still, I still think it's amazing when you show it a picture and you say, what's going on in this picture? And it says, oh, I see a dog looking at a computer, and it's and then it cracks a joke about it. Like I showed my Dulcine's dog looking at the computer. I said, what do you think it's working on? And it says, maybe it's a marketing director. I didn't ask it to make a joke. Clearly there was some level of by some definition of understanding that it understood what's in the picture in order to answer that question.
Do you think your backup camera on your truck understands the object behind it, whether or not a wolf or a car is running at it?
If for example, if they develop they develop the backup camera so that it tells you, oh, not only there's something closer or farther, which is all it does now, but suddenly it says, oh, there's a dog running after you, then it knows there's a dog running after you, right?
So like Teslas have a nice little display. You can look at like what the car sees, right? And it's LiDAR, and it beams its little beams all around it, and then it has a lot of data to infer this is a traffic cone, this is a traffic light, this is a street light, this is a pedestrian based on its walking. Extremely advanced AI, and it even displays it to you. It seems to have a mental model of the world, an inner mental model, you could say. Why have we not been having these same debates? Why has everybody under the sun who's ever written about computers or minds, why are they not being asked, like, is the Tesla conscious? My big, like, it's not even a concern, but I find it really interesting, the kinds of technologies that pop into the world, and then the existential questions they create, right? And, like, why is it the case that when we made flight simulators in the 80s, when the Furby came out, which appeared to talk, when the microwave started finally working with respect to the dynamic unknowns of a single bag of microwave popcorn, when cars started to have backup cameras or little notices that something's in your blind spot, right? Like you start to turn and the car detects that there's another car actually right in that spot. Like, why did that not create a global stir? Why? And it seems to be the same story over and over again, which is something appears that is on the very, very cutting edge frontier. And then we take our human minds and if it resembles something like something a human might do, like, say, playing a piece of chess, like, say, using electricity to power an arm, right? The 18th Victorian era writers and scientists were fascinated by the idea, absolutely fascinated by the idea that you could like reanimate a piece of meat with electricity, and we just seemed to be pieces of meat that were animated by electricity. So, like, all of Frankenstein is like this. If you go back to Gulliver's Travels, Jonathan Swift has a passage there where he's mocking the Royal Society, and one little room of the tour in Gulliver's Travels is a machine which allows any human ignorant of skill to create competent writing in prose in a manner that is indistinguishable from expert version of such prose. This was in like 1496. And it's the same question over and over and over, which is, like, humans have this animist drive. We see things that are obviously not alive as alive all the time. And how do we know? I do believe it's quite possible that machines can be conscious, alive, sentient, or intelligent at some point.
I mean, obviously,
But
if you believe that we are physical objects in the world, if you don't believe in some sort of transcendental soul, you have to believe that at some point you will be able. You don't have to believe that we can do it, but you have to believe that it's at least theoretically possible to have an object that does what humans do, which seems to be, at some level, an ability to assess what's going on around it and then have some sort of agency, right? So I think that the reason we're attributing it more to I think a self-driving car is an example. Possibly we might need AGI in order to have a self-driving car, and maybe the self-driving car will be the first thing we attribute this to, more than the large language model that just talks, right? The ability to go around the world and say, like, I recognize there's something close to me that I need to stop, or this is something I can go through. That is, on some level, an example of understanding and agency, which seems to be what humans are on some level, right? Like, we're going around, we're trying to, like, not die, we're trying to sustain ourselves and make choices in some way, however you want to define that, without getting into the free will debate. But there's got to be a sense in which you have degrees of freedom and you are making choices amongst options, and in a way that a machine, to do that, has to exhibit some understanding of the world around it. Right? What's the extra thing that, when you say alive, sometimes it makes me think, like, that's the animist and kind of, that's positing something extra and magical by saying it's like so impossible for a machine to do this.
Yeah, so I was in Vienna earlier this year, and there's some cathedral, I'm sure it has a name, that everyone was going to. All the tourists were like flocking around, and it was crowded and busy, right? It's like clearly the thing that, like, the little brochure panel. Hold on, let me face this. What is this?
Now you're on top of the handle of the thing.
What's happening? Oh, that's what's happening. Okay, good. It's been a rough 40 years. So everyone's flocking and crowding around this beautiful piece of architecture, right? This building. And right outside, there are these, this like kind of like tourist horse-drawn carriage rides that these tourist trap cities do. You can hop in one of those, and these horses are just milling about outside, kind of standing there waiting for the human to throw a few euros at their operator. And I did a funny thing. So there's a group, and I was standing there, and I was just staring at the horse, right? And I found the horse really fascinating, and because all these people were staring at this building, and I was looking at the horse. And a person I was with was like, "Why are you, like, look at what's in front of you? There's one thing that's amazing and one thing that isn't. This architectural cathedral that has all this history, like hundreds of years of history, and all of Europe, and all of kind of like the it just had so much. It had been bombed during World War II, and they had to restore the roof, and it was really interesting, and people loved it, right?" And my response was, like, we can make that. We know how to make that building. We don't know how to make that horse. Therefore, the horse is infinitely more interesting to me. So we know how to make AI that can pretend to talk to you like a chat, right? We don't know how to make a human brain from scratch. We don't know how to make a single cell from scratch. We don't know how to make anything. We don't know how life starts, persists, ends. We know nothing. And the idea that you have this one category of the way that something works in the natural world, and we're in our infancy of trying to understand, like, how minds work and how brains work and what consciousness and intelligence and all of these related concepts actually are. And on the other hand, we have something that in the arbitrary year of 2022 can kind of converse like us and seems to use phrases that exhibit something like reasoning. And so if there were ChatGPT Cathedral, which is kind of what's happening in the, like, popular press right now, it's getting all kinds of cathedral-like headlines. And then there was like a tiny little, I don't even know, just like the smallest mammal you could find. I would be staring at that, and I ignore the cathedral simply because if we can make it, it becomes uninteresting to me. There are still mysteries in this world. We don't understand life. We do understand AI. All of this, like, Mysterianism, where they're like, oh, it's a black box, we don't really know how it works. Something's happening in there that we can't quite figure out. Not really. Like we do know how it works. It works exactly like all of our other computers. It's a database. It's a dynamic database of lookup tables that generates tokens that we perceive as words, that we perceive as having meaning related to the interiority that in our experience has only been previously present in thinking human beings. We are being massively fooled by the interesting appearance and simulation of emotion that these things type out. If you look at a flight simulator from the 80s, right? I like that example simply because I do think these things are video games, and it's the same hardware that powers both. Like the way that these things render their worlds, their environmental worlds, the games, it's in a cone outward. You're the player, and there's a little cone of rendering that happens where it'll render what's relevant, because all that really matters is what the little video game character sees, right? So it saves all of this efficient computation by just rendering, like, what you're looking at any given time. ChatGPT is just rendering, like, a few responses using language instead of like light. And it's, my question is not really what is GPT's relationship to the human mind? Have we finally created something intelligent? Mine is more, I'm more interested in, like, why are we suddenly having this conversation now. Like, what did this thing do that hit a nerve, which, by the way, computers don't have, only we do, that hit a nerve, that's just a metaphor, that made it suddenly just seem so plausibly close to what we do? And why do we have such short-term memory for historical and intellectual precedent when it comes to this being the same conversation we had when we discovered electricity, and the same conversation we had when we first started making computers and called them thinking machines? The New York Times has a great article about how a computer from like 1952 thinks like a human, does everything like a human. One day we'll have all of our jobs and tasks and minds. And we just have this generational need to keep having this conversation and pretend it's ours and ours alone and unique, and that it's finally truly different, that we finally crossed the event horizon into conscious machines.
Something is totally different.
What
like
is
as
Nothing
having been interacting with computers my whole life,
Right.
this does seem a radical break in the sense that I've been talking to these idiotic voice things, when it says press 3 to get connected to this, and I didn't understand anything. And now yesterday I called Apple Store and I was like, oh God, I gotta talk to a computer. And I said, it said, what do you need? And I said, I just ordered a computer and I want to see if somebody else can pick it up instead of me. It's like, yeah, okay, go to this website and here it'll change. You can change the person that you select to pick up your thing. And I was blown away. I literally said it in a way that I thought like, okay, this is going to get me to talk to a human, because I just made it like so specific to my situation.
Right.
And it, by any sense of the word understanding, understood what I was saying because it gave me back what I needed. Based on
any sense of the word, well, I disagree.
Yeah,
with
you
any
can push
sense
back
of
on
the
that.
word.
Yeah, I figured I gave you an opening.
We're doing playing t-ball.
In the meaningful sense of what it took to understand, in the sense that what it takes for me to say it understood is that it gave the correct answer out of millions of answers that was based on the specific situation.
As does Deep Blue when it plays chess. It gives the correct response to the situation on the chessboard.
And you are correct when you say that computers play chess better than humans now.
Right. And so
there's no way that you can say that humans play better chess than so
it might
you can say it doesn't understand the things around the game, but it definitely understands the game enough to play it better than any human being does.
Right. And so you might conclude that the AIs, let's imagine them a few decades into the future, will reason better than humans reason.
Yeah.
And than any human. They might become superhuman in their ability to reason through those kinds of logical situations. But all that means is that there's a subset of things that we do and think which can be captured by raw logical reasoning. In the same way that there's a subset of things on the Go board or on the chessboard that can be captured by numerical computation. And there's, I think you're, it's lovely that you were blown away. It's an exciting time. These things are amazing. Most technology that we make is fucking amazing. But you being blown away means nothing about the actual nature of the thing in and of itself, right? Your surprise means nothing to answering the question of whether or not they are actually alive, intelligent, sentient, or conscious.
Right.
What the computer engineers say about whether or not it's alive, intelligent, conscious, or sentient means nothing about whether or not it actually is. So much of this, I believe, is a kind of just hyperbole based on this deep need to feel like you're part of some era of transition or some monumental era. We are surprised. As an adult, technology did not used to be like this, and now it is, right?
Uh-huh.
But that truly doesn't change the thing in and of itself. So the surprise means nothing to me. People's theory on how the brain works means nothing to me, right? Because we are so overloaded with incorrect best guesses, full of these kind of loose and blurry metaphors for how it works, how the mind works, simply because we don't know. And so we take all of those things, we take all of those loose, blurry concepts, and then we apply them to the machines that seem to be vaguely similar to us. But there's just, if it is true that these things are interesting, truly something closer than zero between us and rather between nothingness and something that can process information and then life and then humans, if it's truly something close, then I think we also have to expand the category of what we mean by sentience and intelligence to include the microwave and your backup camera and every machine which can, and a smart thermostat, and all of these things which are dynamically interacting with the environment based on their training data, which appear to do something that moves gracefully through the world and
Yeah. So, but
ultimately aren't. So just either expand the definition to include all artificial things, or none of it is.
But like Aaron was saying that the ChatGPT is the same as a rock. Like if you're going to attribute sentience to ChatGPT, then you might as well attribute it to a rock. But there is a meaningful difference between a rock, which no matter what I say to it, just sits there, and something that says not only responds to me talking to it, but says something different according to what I say. So it's like responding dynamically to the specificity of the situation, which requires some level of comprehension, because it's not just spewing random words, and it's not spewing the same words no matter what I say. It's spewing different words according to what words I say to it, and those words now, as the models have developed, become more and more fine-tuned to the reality of the physical world. So like if you ask ChatGPT 3, like I put 3 eggs on top of a laptop and then put another laptop on top, what happens? It would get it wrong, and then you put a little more data and suddenly now it gets it right, even though it's never seen a computer or an egg. Something's going on there, or you're saying, like there seems to be this emergent understanding or reasoning, like you could get it to add 2 numbers that are nowhere in its database, and suddenly like it seems that understanding of adding seems to be happening. Is there some goalpost that you would say like, wow, okay, now it does understand? Or is there no meaningful like input output, like experimental data that would convince you that, okay, now there's something has happened that reflects a genuine understanding of the world?
My version of the like Turing test that we need is, so often we take our supercomputers. We used to take our supercomputers and apply them to weather prediction, right? Weather simulation, because it was the most complicated thing we understood. It scaled very linearly with the amount of computation power you give it. We don't quite do that anymore because now there's more interesting things to do with them. But let's imagine that we go back and make our little AIs into weather predictors again. And let's imagine that they start talking to each other because, I have by many other people's definitions gained sentience, gained something. And so they start to be more interested in other computers than they are in people, because I think the transmission rate is about 1,000x more quicker for silicon electrical transmission than it is within us. So their timing, their speed is going to be much quicker. They're going to see us moving about the world the same way we see plants moving, right? They're going to need like a time-lapse camera sped up in order to interact with us. So they get bored, they start to interact with each other, they start to say, let's go back to this weather prediction thing. We might be really good at modeling like the Earth's climate and atmosphere and all these particles and everything. Let's go back to that. And then they make these little weather reports and weather predictions. And then at some point, they might start doing what we do, which is saying, well, the temperature, is 75 degrees, but the apparent temperature, it feels like 110. Once the AIs have apparent temperature, once they have like an objective measure, and then say, but it feels like this other thing, then I will believe that they're sentient. That is my new definition, right? Like
And they can't just say that, they have to mean it.
Well,
right? Because they could say it as a performative thing for humans, or
right.
You're saying that they have to do it to each
They
other.
have to do it to each other. That to me is the important part. They have to actually, it has to be useful, actionable information that the subjective version of temperature for them is different than the objective version of temperature for them. At that point, I'd be intrigued. At that point, I would begin to like open my eyes a little more widely.
By then, they'll probably do it though in a language that humans don't even understand, and they'll just be like operating at a level that we just don't. Like, why would they include us in that in that interaction.
Look, when the
We'll be like the ants.
yeah, look, when Furby came out, right? This little like tiny owl. Sorry, I had a pet named Oil. Confused the two. Tiny little robotic owl, right? It came out, I think, in 1997, Christmas holiday year, maybe 1998, and it does this amazing thing, which is it starts to speak a language called Furbish. It's a made-up language, pigeon language, totally made up. And then over time, over the course of like a couple months or weeks of interacting with it, it slowly starts to learn and speak in English, right? Even there, I just did it. I slipped up, but I'll fix it. Because what it's actually doing is there's a database of a couple hundred words in Furbish and a couple hundred words in English, and when it's on, and you can't turn it off, right? That's kind of interesting. The Furby has no off switch. Do you know why they did that? It's because we have no off switch. So the guy who was making it, the co-creator of it, this guy Caleb Chung, he decided that like, I'm not going to build anything on it that we don't have, because he wanted it to be a life simulator. And the NSA and various governmental agencies actually banned the Furby because they thought it listened, understood, and learned language. Even though on the back end, if you actually look, it was a pre-programmed database, which over time would switch out its Furbish words for the equivalent translation in English. So our human perception of what was happening was, as I spoke to this robot, over time, it appeared to sound more similar to me. And we love that. We love when things are like us. It's the most like narcissistic kind of joyful thing, right? And it didn't learn. It didn't understand anything. And what I think is so interesting is this idea that people think that generative technologies, like these AIs that can generate words, generate images, that there's something special about that generative side that seems to break determinism, that seems to be similar to free will, right? It's like they're creating something new from a different set of underlying initial conditions. Like, isn't that what life is? Isn't that what free will is? But if you ask ChatGPT to pick a random number between 1 and 100, it'll say 42 more likely than not.
So will you probably.
Right? But so why? Why does it say 42 more likely?
Magicians always like bank on this. They can like have you think that you're thinking of a random number, but they know what number you're going to think of. Because most of the time people think of 7 or something between 1 and 10.
So, but why do you think it says 42?
Because of all the times that 42 is mentioned in its data. I don't know. Tell me.
So you think it's overrepresented, that number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah. And so, but why would GPT not choose a random number?
I don't know. Randomness is really hard, right? For computers in general.
So do you know that most AI for the last few decades is programmed in Python? And there's a joke amongst programmers that you set the random number to 42. So it's this known inside thing, which is when you're setting your initial variables, in order for computers to generate a random, they're not doing randomness, it's all pseudo-random.
Right.
But you have to set the initial value to something. And then when it's generating a random number for cryptography or any kind of thing, it has to start from somewhere. It needs a starting spot. And just as a joke, because everybody's read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because it had these sentient Earth-sized computer, right? Like that was what generated the question and the answer. So for decades, there's been this number that has sat as an inside joke, which is now percolated up to GPT and to ChatGPT. And like, there's something. So we talk about how we don't understand how it works, right? Often it seems to be that there's some mysterious ghost in the machine or something. But it's not a ghost in the machine. Every single one of these things is for a reason. And there's just nothing special that is outside of its programming. To me, the most amazing thing about what we learned, the biggest surprise, was not that that these things have reasoning, that they have some sort of internal concepts or states. It's that, and I just truly wish that people would land on the right amazing part of this. This is amazing, right? The technology is absolutely fucking amazing. But it's not because it's like us. I think the lesson that we need to draw from it is that there is more information contained within language itself than we previously realized. That's the lesson. That actually, looking at everything we have written and taking this huge database of all of the internet and every book, you don't actually need to have interacted with the world. The language itself and its relationship between words, thousands of words into the future and thousands of words into the past, contains information within those relations of where those words are placed and spaced. So like, what I wish was happening was not all of these questions and debates about like, oh my God, is it alive? Is it conscious? Do we have to regulate it? In the same way that the Furby was regulated when it came out, because it was also pulling the same kind of magic trick. What I wish people were talking about was, is like, oh my God, like language itself is remarkable. The lesson here is not we created life under our own noses. It's that with just like a digital record of just our words, something can truly appear and simulate a full conversational intelligence with just language, and that the mental models of our world are contained within the language. That to me is the amazing part of this.
Well, you've just put into words something that I've, no pun intended, but something that I've been thinking about a lot. Like,
No pun
is
achieved,
understanding the world, is the world made of language in some sense? And is our understanding of it made of, and maybe not only made possible by language, but also impossible without it? That's another question that I think is worth asking with this. Like, how much is intelligence and thought possible without language? Maybe much less than we thought, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, this is wonderful. I think we can stop. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Tao.
I have a PS, but I think that's interesting. But what is, I have, no, it's so interesting.